is disingenuous, disloyal, selfish, and opportunistic.
Ouch. Rough times for the Conservative Party. Instead of spending the week focused on their critique of the federal budget, they're dealing with internal turmoil. One of their MPs crossing the floor to join the Liberals, another announcing he's resigning his seat. I'm Catherine Cullen, and this week on the House, what's wrong inside the Conservative Party? And is Pierre Poilievre's leadership in trouble? Political strategists are here, and we'll ask Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer whether he played a role in the drama. Plus, Mark Carney's budget was touted as generational, the fiscal plan to combat Trump's tariffs. Did it meet the moment? The Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne is here, and we'll rate what the budget means for you with our scorecard. But first, dramatic departures from the Conservatives that could help hand Mark Carney a majority government. The House is now in session.
Thanks, Senator.
Chris d'Entremont given a hero's welcome at Liberal caucus this week. The previously Conservative Nova Scotia MP decided to join the Liberals on Budget Day. Among his reasons, issues with Pierre Poilievre's leadership.
Over the last number of months, I wasn't feeling that I was aligned with the ideals of what the leader of the opposition had been talking about. It's time to actually try to lead a country, to try to make it better, and not try to knock it down, not to continue to be negative.
By Wednesday, rumors were rife that more would follow, as many as 7 Conservatives. By late Thursday, another twist. Edmonton Conservative MP Matt Genereux said he's leaving politics. In one of several rapidly issued statements, Genereux denied there was any coercion behind that decision. CBC News, though, did confirm he was in talks with Mark Carney earlier in the week. So, how damaging is this for the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre? We have our strategist here to dissect this wild week. Marci Surkes, former senior advisor to Justin Trudeau, now chief strategy officer at Compass Rose, and Kate Harrison, conservative strategist and vice chair at Summa Strategies. Thank you both for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Good to be here.
Kate, down 2 MPs in 48 hours. How bad is this for the Conservatives?
Well, what, 1.5? I mean,
you have half a Genereux, is that it?
Mr. Genereux sticking around, by his word until the spring. Listen, it's never good to lose a member of the team, particularly in the dramatic fashion of Tuesday on Budget Day, which is a big day for the government, but also for the opposition. And obviously, the consequence of that was, everybody being focused on the palace intrigue of the floor crossing, as opposed to a critical response of the budget itself. So I'm not going to sit here and say that it's no big deal. Of course it is. I do think, though, that it would be a mistake to overestimate this. I think that what we're seeing right now, the Conservatives have the largest elected caucus not to form government. This is growing pains. I think that, Chris d'Entremont comes from a part of the country and a riding in particular where, by his own admission to his colleagues, it was going to be very difficult for him to get reelected under a blue banner. And for every Chris d'Entremont in a Boomer-dominated riding in Atlantic Canada, I see Conservatives making gains in suburban parts of the country. So I think this is part of the coalition shift that we're seeing happen with the Conservatives. And again, it's not great to lose people, but I do think that this is part of the course of, being out of government for some time and the shifting nature of the coalition. D'Entremont clearly feels he can get elected more easily as a Liberal, and that may well be true in his part of the country.
Well, I mean, I suppose his case is that he's doing it because it's the right thing for the country, although we would imagine that any politician takes their own electoral prospects into account as well. I want to bring Marci in here in a sec, but you're painting some positive pictures there and suggesting that, this is to some extent normal. In a word, morale amongst Conservatives right now. One word.
Moderate.
Okay. Marci, speaking of mood, morale, I mean, there has been conversation this week. Mélanie Joly said she'd been talking to Chris d'Entremont for something like 5 years. There are reports the Liberals were told not to seem as if they were gloating when he came over. What is the appropriate level of glee for the Liberals right now? You giggled a little there, I think, Marci.
I may have giggled, but I've said this before. I will say it again. I actually don't delight in watching these things happen. As a practitioner of politics, as I have been for the last 2 decades in this country, I have lived this on both sides. Sometimes somebody comes your way and sometimes one of your own goes the other. And it is a difficult moment for a caucus and for a party, regardless of what the circumstance is. Yes, it is a happier circumstance when it comes in your favor, but you know that can change in an instant. I also know that it was only 1 year ago that we were talking to you, Catherine, and my party and my caucus was suffering similar type of circumstance of caucus discontent. At that time, I won't use Kate's word, the mood was not moderate, the mood was low. And the lowness of that mood continued on for several weeks. It was a drip, drip, drip effect. And I won't dispute Kate's analysis of the ease with which one might run and win in Atlantic Canada as a Liberal right now. But I will say that there has been a compounding effect, a stacking of bad days for Mr. Poilievre, and that began in the general election, regardless of the overall outcome for his party. Not returning one's seat is never a good day or a good look for a leader, period.
Yeah.
He returned to the Commons. He had, I would say, probably a moment of grace with which he may have found himself more sure-footed, may have taken a different approach. Certainly looked like he had the caucus behind him and the party united in supporting him. And that has ebbed a bit over the last number of weeks due to some perhaps self-enforced errors. And so really the story here is twofold. The first is that the math is mathing better for the Liberals than it is for the Conservatives. And Mr. Poilievre is going to have to reassure people very quickly that he still has what it takes. He is appearing to be yesterday's man when you're fighting the ghosts of Justin Trudeau. If he can somehow wake up this morning and be in this moment, that's his best possible outcome right now.
Kate, I do think it's important to try to sort of help untangle this moment a bit, though, for folks. CBC News reported when it comes to Matt Genereux that he met with the Prime Minister earlier this week. So there's a sense there were conversations going on. Several media outlets have alleged that Genereux was threatened, coerced by Conservatives into not crossing the floor. Genereux has explicitly denied that. The idea, though, that there's this cloud around the Conservatives, this sense that someone within the caucus was being pressured, what do you think the effect of that is?
Yeah, I mean, I have to take Mr. Genereux at his word. I'd also observe that if he wanted to remain a parliamentarian, if he was indeed talking to the government, then that would have provided an option for him. And he's somebody that's been elected for a long time in the opposition backbenches. And so, in the same way that Chris D'Entremont made that calculation for himself, then it sounds like maybe that was an option for Genereux that he ultimately declined. So,
but the suggestion, I guess, is that someone in the Conservative Party or someone said, "Hey, if you think you're going to walk over there, this could get quite bad for you."
There was also a lot of suggestions this week that as many as 6 or 7 MPs were going to cross the floor, and that did not materialize. The same thing was said a couple of weeks ago when the Prime Minister gave his speech on the 22nd of October. The government has done a very good job of muddying the waters for the Conservatives to get out a cogent response on things like the budget because everybody is seized with the caucus drama. So just to Marci's point, I think the message here for Conservatives is to look at the numbers. Conservatives are holding at, in most public opinion polls, about 40%. Had the NDP not totally fumbled the ball in the last election, that's a healthy minority or perhaps a majority government. So you look at those numbers and the fact that, despite a very disappointing loss and the leader having lost his seat, Conservatives are still performing well. The Prime Minister, still no trade deal. His personals are pretty good, but they're not Trudeau-mania numbers. This is not an absolutely rosy picture for the governing party, and I think it's going to get harder before it gets better, at least in terms of our economic situation. So people will make the choices that are right for them. But I do think that the dynamic here in terms of the government and opposition polling reality is a little different than it was for Mr. Trudeau, who had been struggling for some time, and that's when you had that unrest come out. So I guess the message here, I would say, for Conservatives is to take heart in looking at the numbers. There's still a significant number of Canadians that are backing the blue team. And so expect that things might actually get better as opposed to worse.
The blue team numbers are good, but the leader is a drag on the ticket.
Marci, some people, we see this when these floor crossing stories come out, there's a certain number of people who say, how is this even possible? There was just an election. How dare someone do this? Why does it make sense from a political standpoint to have floor crossers?
Any member of parliament who is elected can choose to exercise, their ability to vote and govern themselves and comport themselves based on what they feel is in the best interest of their community. They are not necessarily bound to adhere to the rules of engagement of the party under which they were elected. And that may seem counterintuitive to some, but really, when we go to the polls and we are electing someone, we may be electing a party in some cases. You may choose a party or you may choose a party leader, but ultimately you are electing your member of parliament. And that individual is an individual representative. They can choose to represent themselves as an individual, as an independent, or to affiliate with a party or to change parties. There are many who have argued that before someone crosses the floor to another party, there should be time out, so to speak. They should sit as an independent for a time, be able to communicate to the voters in their riding their rationale for doing so. There may be some merit in that ultimately. I think, unfortunately, that may be a little bit of an academic argument just in the way parliaments function. So, people can move, people can change stripes. It happens all sides. It just doesn't happen that often. And that's why it feels spectacular when it does.
The grab bag of goodies that government can offer is a lot bigger than that of the opposition as well.
This whole conversation, Kate, has been building to this question about Pierre Poilievre's leadership. I mean, how much trouble is he in right now to have two people, one way or another, walk out in a 48-hour span?
Yeah, my estimation is that we're probably at the tail end of the drama. And I do think that, again, you look at the polling numbers, you look at a lot of the support that Poilievre has at the grassroots level. That's very enviable for any politician. And so when I'm thinking about, for example, the forthcoming leadership review in January, I think the outcome is likely to be the same. I think that he's safe. Again, things will get challenging if more folks go and if you see things tip towards a majority. But I think that, this may be relatively isolated.
Perception is reality in politics, and the perception right now is that he can't keep people around him, close to him. They don't view him as a leader. It's a tough fight back from this.
Marci, I will just ask you in closing. Ultimately, Liberals only gained one vote here if Genereux is indeed going to hang around until the spring. Do you think a majority government is still a possibility for the Liberals right now?
It's like the Blue Jays. We were counting down the magic number to the playoff berth. Here we are at the magic number of 1, maybe 2. It's very close. It is still possible. It's not a given, but it is possible.
And they need it.
Yes.
They need it because things are going to get worse, right?
It is always dramatic times. Love to talk about it with both of you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks,
Catherine.
Kate Harrison and Marci Surkes. It has been a long wait for this budget. Justin Trudeau was still Prime Minister the last time we had an update on the country's finances. This Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is going big on spending on defense and infrastructure, but big on the deficit too, more than $78 billion. We're going to talk to the finance minister and also break down what the budget means for you in a moment. But first, the Conservatives have made it clear they will not be supporting the budget. Andrew Scheer, the Conservative Party House Leader, joined me in studio Friday right as he was about to cast a vote, virtually on his phone, on a Bloc Québécois amendment to that budget. Have a listen.
After the speaker puts the question, there's an app on our phones that opens up the voting interface. So I tap on the button and it asks me if I want to vote yay or nay. So I'll be voting nay on this one. This is the Bloc amendment. And then the camera opens up and I have to do a 3D scan of my face. So I better take my glasses off because when I set it up, I didn't need the glasses. But this is what turning 46 does to you. And I now need cheaters.
You're waiting for it to recognize your face?
Yeah, it's doing the 3D mapping and get the green check mark and submit. There we are.
First time we've ever had anyone vote live on the House. Thank you very much, Andrew Scheer. So, Andrew Scheer, Conservative Party House Leader, we are having this conversation Friday afternoon. Welcome back to the House.
Great to be here.
I don't have to tell you, we're in the middle of a trade war. This budget is supposed to juice investment, get energy projects, some of which you've been calling for years, built. It's got that tax cut from earlier in the year baked into the calculations. Why not say, hey, it's not perfect, because I know that you do not love this budget, but it is better for the country than going into an election?
Well, because our preferred course of action is we don't believe in the false choice between a bad budget and an election. We were hoping that the government was going to listen to our ideas to bring down the cost of living, to bring in an affordable budget. tackle high grocery prices, get a grip on inflation, and they didn't do that. So we have to, we have to represent the 8.2 million Canadians who voted for us because they want that fiscal responsibility. They want to address the cost of living crisis, and so that's what we're going to do.
Are you certain that all Conservative MPs are going to vote against this budget? No abstentions?
Well, what I can tell you today is that we're going to oppose this budget, and that's
that's not certainty.
Well, that's what I'm telling you today. We're going to oppose this budget for a few simple reasons. This is not going to make Canada better. This is a budget that, for example, increases the industrial carbon tax. So here we are in the middle of a trade war with the United States, and what is this government doing? It's saying, hey, when you go out and compete, you've got to compete with this industrial carbon tax that the Americans don't have to face.
The budget says it will improve the effectiveness. Your interpretation of that is it's going up.
Do you want to bet lunch?
I'm not a betting woman,
okay.
Andrew Scheer. I'm just saying you were reading to improve effectiveness.
Well, if they said they were going to lower it, why not say lower it? That would be great. I mean, hey, if they said we were going to lower the carbon tax, we'd have to go back and have a second look at that, perhaps. But then, even as I say that, I think about the over $300 billion in new debt that it's saddling onto Canadians. Mark Carney gave a very gloomy, bleak speech telling young Canadians they're going to have to sacrifice even more. This after 10 years of moving back home with their parents, not being able to find jobs and things like that. We don't think anybody in Canada needs to sacrifice more. We don't think after 10 years of the cost of living crisis that Liberals have caused that the solution is they need to sacrifice more so that government can get bigger and bigger. And that's another reason why we're voting against this budget, because Mark Carney is telling Canadians that more of your tax dollars, more of your listeners' tax dollars will now go to pay the interest charges on the debt than even health care. That's not sustainable. That's not what Canadians want, as thousands of Canadians can't find family doctors. We don't need to be paying bankers and bondholders even more. We should be freeing up that money for better investments to actually improve people's lives.
A lot of the things in the budget, there are some, I guess, wins, we could call them, in the form of community centres and things like that would go into ridings that your MPs hold. So there's a community centre in Edmonton, for example, an earth sciences centre in a Quebec riding. You may not support the budget, but I wonder if you think the government has put some of your MPs in a difficult position. The language is very clear in the budget. This budget passes, these things are being built. To say to their constituents, sorry, I can't support this budget, even though that's the difference between you getting a new community centre or not.
Well, it's pretty disingenuous for the Liberals to try to make that case, because every government that I've ever witnessed as a member of Parliament, Liberal, Conservative, has infrastructure spending that funds projects in every community in the country. That didn't stop Liberals from voting against Conservative budgets. There were lots of recreational facilities, wastewater treatment plants, all kinds of things to spur economic growth when Conservatives were tabling budgets, because they naturally get funded by those federal provincial agreements. And Conservatives would continue that. Had we won the last election, we would be helping municipalities with their infrastructure needs. We would be tying that help with real metrics to do things like bring down the cost of housing, something that Liberals said they were going to do, but we see development charges rising after the Carney Liberals are writing big checks to municipalities. So they're not getting the results of lower development costs, which will bring down housing. They're spending a lot of the money. And that's always been the problem with Liberals. They're very good at announcements. They're very good at telling you that things are just about to get better, but they just never actually do. And I think that's what I'd ask your listeners to consider, is that after 10 years, is life better off with these Liberals? Like, are things getting less expensive? Is housing getting more affordable? Are job prospects looking more optimistic for young people? Because when I talk to people, the answer is no.
You are the House Leader. I want to ask you about what's going on in your party right now. You've had a floor crosser and a resignation in the span of 48 hours. As the House Leader, what are you saying to your MPs so that no one else leaves?
Well, I don't believe that anybody is looking to leave. Every parliament has some kind of shifting between the numbers of MPs, almost every parliament anyway. It's disappointing anytime someone decides to put their own personal grievances ahead of what they told their voters and what they told their volunteers just a few months ago. But look, Pierre had a great message to caucus on Wednesday, a great response. We've got a job to do. I don't believe that there are too many Canadians out there concerned about palace intrigues and why individual MPs might be making these decisions. They want us to fight for them. They want us to help put forward solutions that will improve their lives, bring down the cost of living.
Are you putting pressure, though, on your MPs to ensure they don't leave?
There's no pressure.
You haven't put any pressure, because there's reporting out there. You have not put any pressure on anyone.
There are rumors put forward by sources that are anonymous. I look at, take Mr. Generou, for example. I take his statement I take what he said in his statement at his word, that this was a long-standing decision. Yeah, this was a long-standing decision that was perhaps precipitated because of some of the rumors
decision,
that were...
The election was 6 months ago, is the thing. How long-standing can the decision be?
Well, I don't know when Matt came to that realization. I know that situations in people's personal lives change all the time. And
did you talk to him?
To Mr. General?
Yeah.
Oh, we talk all the time. We've been friends for a long time. He was one of the MPs that supported my leadership when I ran in 2017. He's a great,
obviously, about this, like, it's a pretty confusing situation. Please don't contact my family. I'm not being coerced. From the outside, people at home are going, "What the heck is going on?" So help us understand.
But if you look at it through the lens of Matt General, and I would suggest that when Liberals start putting out rumors that feed a bit of a media frenzy, where all of a sudden people are inundating him with phone calls and messages, that might be a lot for an MP who didn't ask for this aspect of the conversation to turn on him. So I read his statement as saying, like, holy smokes, this feeding frenzy in the parliamentary press gallery because a few Liberal sources are putting out some misinformation. Rather than trying to read between the lines, I take what he said at face value.
Is it misinformation to say he met with the Prime Minister? CBC News has reported that. We have solid sourcing on it.
Well, does Matt say that? I mean, this is one of the things that, okay, so I could say a lot of things, and would you just take that to the bank without doing any kind of fact checking or actual...
We check with our sources. That's the work we do, Mr. Scheer. Our Conservative...
Will Mark Carney say that he met with Matt General?
Are Conservative MPs allowed to meet with Mark Carney?
I mean, Pierre Poilievre met with Mark Carney. Mark Carney wanted to have a meeting with our leader, Pierre Poilievre. We gave him some concrete examples of how he could help bring down the cost of living. Unfortunately, Mark Carney didn't listen to any of those.
Okay. Your now former colleague, Chris d'Entremont, said he was leaving because under the Liberals, he felt that he could make the country better and not try to knock it down. That is very clearly, the knock it down is aimed at your party. Do you take his critique to heart?
What Chris d'Entremont told me was that he was upset that he didn't win the deputy speaker election, that our colleagues... So just for your listeners, the opposition in a minority parliament normally gets to nominate the deputy speaker. Chris d'Entremont convinced our colleagues that we should elect him as deputy speaker in the previous parliament. He wanted to continue on in that role. Our caucus made a different decision, and now we have Tom Commitch as the deputy speaker.
But he said publicly this isn't what that was about. He was upset. He moved on.
Well, he's told me that privately, and he has told me that was something that really bothered him. He also told me that he didn't like my YouTube videos. So those are the two things that he's told me.
Could that not be about tone?
I don't know. I mean, perhaps, but he could always unsubscribe.
You have.
You don't like my videos, Catherine? You don't have to watch them. I don't know. I mean, it seems like a bit of a flimsy reason to make a decision like this.
Well, that's not what he's saying. He's saying it's about leadership.
I can only say about what he's told me. And when I think about the people who I know this to be true. I wasn't in his campaign office, but I know that he had people come into his campaign office and spend time door knocking for him because they believed in what Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party was offering. I know he had people who didn't have a lot of money write checks of $20 and $30 because they wanted to chip in and help him get elected as a Conservative. And I know that he saw the platform, and I know that he was involved in some of the caucus discussions about what went into the platform. And he said, "Yep, all that sounds great." And he carried the Conservative flag into that election. And now, when he didn't get the position that he coveted, and he has said as much in some of his interviews, I don't think that's a very good reason, but he'll have to explain that to his constituents.
But he knows that all his constituents felt that way too, and he has still come out the end saying, you guys are too focused on knocking people down, and the other guys are a better fit for the future of the country.
Well, I asked Chris d'Entremont point blank, if you won the deputy speaker election, would we be having this conversation? And he said probably not.
What did you do personally to try to get him to stay?
I asked him to consider all the people who believed in him, who believed in Pierre, the 8.2 million Canadians who were desperate for a lower cost of living, who wanted to pay less for groceries, not more, who wanted their children and the young people in Canada have a better future, and to consider that.
And the fact that wasn't persuasive, do you take
once he told me that it was the grievance over the deputy speaker election, it was not. I don't have a time machine, and I'm not sure that would be.
We would have led with that if you did, Andrew Scheer. Yeah. Listen, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Catherine.
Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer. Let's turn back to the budget now with the Finance Minister, François-Philippe Champagne. We spoke Friday. Thank you for joining me.
It's a real pleasure to be with you, Catherine.
You and the Prime Minister promised a budget that would be transformational, generational, but I'm sure you know there's a lot of criticism that it didn't meet the mark. The Ontario Chamber of Commerce says the budget is more transitional than transformational. The Business Council of Canada says it's not transformational. Economist Mike Moffat says on housing, disappointing is too weak of a word. Does it worry you when so many voices are saying they're not sure that this does the job?
Well, I think you have to compare that. I mean, I would say our G7 partners may have a different view. When you look in the G7, because you have to compare Germany, which is the largest economy in Europe, if you look at their plan, you're talking about 100 billion euro over 500 billion euro, over 12 years. And if you look at Canada, 450 billion euro over 5 years, now you start to see the scope and scale of what we're doing to transform the country, because you can not only look on the absolute term, but you have to look at relative to other G7 economy. And I would say in that, Canada stands out. In fact, the International Monetary Fund said, there's only two countries who can really afford to do that, and it's Canada and Germany. But that's what I would say. I think Canadians understand there's a bit of headwind. We felt it in people feel it on the factory floor, in the fields. People have seen it in so many ways in their life. What we're saying, but if you look at Canada, we have the fiscal capacity to be able to invest in ourselves, and then we have to be judicious in where we invest. So infrastructure, housing, productivity and competitiveness, and obviously our sovereignty and our defense. And therefore, at the same time, you need to put the house in order.
Minister, I want to ask you about those headwinds you mentioned. You are trying to use tax write-offs and other measures to basically psych businesses up about spending money and making investments. There is still a lot of economic uncertainty because of Donald Trump. Isn't that going to make it a lot harder to do what you're trying to do right now to convince businesses to invest?
Well, I would say, what's the alternative? I think we need to invest in ourselves, build one Canadian economy, finish the work of Confederation, make sure that if you produce goods in one province, they can be sold across the nation. We need to become our own best customers. And overall, we need to invest in ourselves. I think that if you look at what we're doing on productivity and competitiveness, that's a challenge we had in Canada for decades we've been talking about. And now we're investing in the kind of thing that is going to grow the economy. But at the same time, we understood that the main issue for Canadians is affordability. So on one end, people focus on what's going to happen at the end of the week, at the end of the month. But at the same time, they understand that we need to invest in order to grow the economy, to position Canada for the future. And my message to Canadians, we're going to be fine. If you compare Canada to other G7 countries, we're a big magnet for talent. We know how to build cars, we build planes, we build ships. We have critical minerals that are going to be essential for the economy of the 21st century. We have energy. And we're the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. So yes, there's headwind. It's not unique to Canada. Our largest trading partner decided to change the rules of the game, and we feel it. Other countries are feeling it. But I would say in that sense, that's why we want to have an investment budget.
Pardon me, Minister. I do want to ask you about affordability because you mentioned it there. A lot of measures aimed at business. Regular folks who are struggling to pay their bills, though. There's not new help in this budget, or certainly not a lot of it. Why not offer more pocketbook help to people?
Well, the first thing we did was a tax cut for 22 million Canadians. That's the flagship initiative on affordability. But we didn't wait for the budget. But it's not new. Well, but we didn't wait for the budget, but it's in the budget because that was something that Canadians needed now. So we could have waited for the time of the budget, but we did it in advance. We did, in fact, as the first measure. Then we said what we need, what people are concerned about is affordable housing. We're doubling down to make sure that we can build more affordable homes for Canadians. And at the same time, we wanted to make sure that by building a strong economy, there would be more opportunities and possibilities for Canadians. So affordability, you're right, that's the key point. And that measure of reducing taxes is leaving more money in the pockets of Canadians. And by growing the economy, you may have seen that in the budget, we said, our plan will enable $1 trillion in the economy, and that would translate in $3,000 per Canadian over the period. So this is significant because on one end, you're quite right. That's why our eyes really focus on today, making sure you can help Canadians now. and at the same time, you build the economy. So we were true to our values, maintain the social programs that matter to Canadians, pharmacare, dental care, childcare, but at the same time, change the course and saying that in 3 years we will balance our operating expenses with revenues, and what we borrow after will be for investments. And Canadians get it. You go to the grocery, you spend, you buy a house, you invest.
Pardon me, Minister, but let's talk a bit more about that, because there is a substantial deficit in this budget, $78 billion more. The Conservatives point out Canada is now spending more money on debt servicing than federally on healthcare. They say it's not sustainable. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say 75% of it was first for affordability and secondly for sovereignty. I think Canadians would understand that faced with the changing world, the scope, speed, and scale of what's happening in the world, you probably have to go back to 1945 or the fall of the Berlin Wall to see so much change at the same time. And so the first thing we did what Canadians would do, we supported each other. So when there were tariffs imposed on industry, our auto workers, our steel workers, our canola farmers, we said we will stick together. We will help these industries to pivot. We will help the workers. We'll help the families. The other part of it is measures around affordability, which you mentioned as the first one, which is the tax cut that we offered to 22 million Canadians. So if you look at that number, you just have to remember, because that's important for people watching and listening to us, is that 75% of it is for sovereignty and affordability. And I think the moment requires that in terms of investment in people, because yes, you want to pivot, but at the same time, you need to take care of people now. And that's why you see in that number, a good part of it is really to do two things that I would say Canadians would say. Obviously, you need to respond to the tariffs, and obviously at the same time, if you can support Canadian on affordability, that's what people need now.
On Friday, the Prime Minister said, quote, "Don't worry, we're on the pipeline stuff. It's gonna happen." Does that mean that your government is about to go ahead with this pipeline without BC's buy-in, Minister?
Well, what I can say is that, we have the ambition to be an energy superpower. Canada is already an energy superpower in conventional and renewable energy. And the world needs more of Canada's energy. So I think this has been, and it's not just new, this has been key to the Canadian economy. And
right,
we can
but is
do
a
that
pipeline going to happen?
Sustainably. Sorry?
But but I understand that, Minister, but he's saying a new pipeline is going to happen, and we don't have buy-in from BC. So I'm trying to figure out how you're going to square that.
But I would say, let's see. For the time being, we have the major project office. We said that we would do things in this country differently. We'll work with our Indigenous partner. We'll work with obviously provinces. At the same time, I think also Canadians understand that the natural resources sector is a big engine of Canada's economy. It's true in mining. We're going to be a leader in critical minerals. We're going to be a leader in nuclear energy. We're going to be a leader in liquefied natural gas. Canada has a lot to offer to the world, and we can do it also in a manner which is very sustainable and responsible.
Finally, Minister, as we're recording this, the Conservatives have lost 2 MPs this week. I wonder whether you would be comfortable with the Liberals getting a majority government through floor crossings, wielding power that you didn't win in an election.
Well, listen, I've been a bit busy this week, as you might have seen. So
I'm sure you noticed, though.
I'm really focused on the budget and delivering for Canadians because, one thing they told me, we want to move from reliance to resilience and the uncertainty you set into opportunity. So my focus has been there. Obviously, we welcome Chris D'Entremont, the new member in our team. And I think, there's probably people on the other side which are doing a bit of soul searching because when you look at the budget that's going to invest more in infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, health infrastructure that are needed across our country, strengthen our armed forces to defend our sovereignty, making our small, medium-sized businesses more competitive, do more affordable housing. I think for them, there's a bit of soul searching because I can tell you the mood of the nation. I was on the road for the last 2 days in the airports, in the street. People said, Canada is meeting the moment. We're going to invest in ourselves. We're going to be strong, and it's going to be okay. So I think I would not be surprised that you have people on the other side of the aisle which are doing a bit of soul searching. How could they explain
maybe
to
walking,
their constituents?
not just soul searching? Is that what you're implying?
I don't know. I'm not. I can only imagine if you're on the other side and you see these things. It's pretty difficult to go back to your constituent and say, at a moment like that, you would not be supporting Canada to go forward and really, support the government agenda and the budget, which is really driven to grow Canada stronger. I mean, that's what I assume is going on for a number of people on the other side of the aisle.
Did you deliberately court some of them with this budget, though, particularly announcing specific projects that would be in opposition ridings?
Well, listen, I only focus on what Canadians want. To be honest, I don't have much time to go around and I listen to people. Obviously, we're a minority government. We need to work with others. But this is really a budget that puts Canadian first and Canada first. And I think that's what you see in investing in ourselves, trade corridors, one Canadian economy, our own best customers. I think those are the type of things that resonate with Canadians. So for me, I'm always focused on what Canadians want and the mood of the nation. I would say, let's pass this budget, let's get to work, let's execute, because we want to do big things in Canada and we have the wherewithal to do it.
I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much, François-Philippe Champagne.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Minister of Finance François-Philippe Champagne. Lots more coming up on the House podcast. Still to come, will this budget unlock investment and counter Trump's tariffs, or will the deficit drag Canada down? And what does it mean for you? Stick around. We're back after this short break. I'm Catherine Cullen. You're listening to The House, making politics make sense. Give us a follow so you never miss an episode. Or, if you like us, review the show or recommend us to a friend. Mark Carney says this budget will help Canada attract $1 trillion of investment over the next 5 years. Will he succeed? And how big a problem is that whopping $78 billion deficit? Here to discuss, Goldy Hyder, president of the Business Council of Canada, and Armine Yalnizyan, an economist and Atkinson Fellow on the future of workers. Goldy, Armine, welcome back to the House.
Good to be with you.
Thank you for having us. Goldy, this is a budget dedicated to boosting investment. From what you've seen so far, how much confidence are you feeling that it's going to work?
Well, time will tell. A budget document is a document of intentions and trying to enable outcomes. The outcomes will let us know whether it worked or not. It's an ambitious goal to believe that we can suddenly get to $500 billion worth of investment. Some have even started to double the numbers. What we need is momentum. We need some momentum to show that we can change the frame in terms of building out an economy. And there's a lot of pieces of this puzzle here, whether you're talking about hard infrastructure, whether you're talking about permitting, regulations to get into the mines. Everybody's talking about critical minerals, like they're all readily available somewhere. They're in the ground. In many cases, we don't have the road or the infrastructure to get there, the train tracks and so forth. We've got challenges in our immigration system that are going to affect the way in which we can staff many of these projects and so forth. So I think this is a serious time. The budget itself is a good change of frame from what we've become used to in budget making, which was a lot of deficit finance programs. We've gotten away from that. Program spending is actually down. So there are pieces of it that are encouraging, but the ultimate measure is, does it do what it says it's going to do?
But generational, you said you don't buy it, that this is generational
No,
change.
and it's not just what I think. I think right across the country, everybody has been saying that high expectations, but low on the delivery side. But time will tell.
Armine, what do you think?
Well, I find it interesting that Goldy says this is a welcome change. It is a necessary change because we're under economic attack. And so it's the most business-forward budget I have seen since the 1980s. And it is designed to actually attract investment at a time when we know we are going to be massively disinvested in. Mm-hmm. So will it make the difference? I don't know. My problem with the budget is that it will take years, as Goldy says, for it to play out, whether this works or not. In the meantime, households are the major driver of GDP, and a lot of people are going to lose ground way before these investments show up at the door in terms of new jobs or higher spending. And I fear that there wasn't enough economic resilience in the short run that was built into this budget. It was a very capital investment-focused budget and not a very human-focused budget.
Is there one thing that you feel is missing in particular on that front?
Gigantically, the EI reforms that we have been talking about since 2015 and are low-hanging fruit. They don't cost them money if they want to do it by raising maximum insurable earnings so that those people earning six figures like the people in the trade-exposed sectors in steel, in auto, that were unionized and working overtime, they don't lose their housing, and then they don't get turned to a rental market that has no room for those at the bottom anyway.
This $78 billion deficit, Goldy, I mean, it is big. It's not something that we're used to seeing outside of the pandemic or wartime. The government is making the case that we need to swing for the fences, that we have to take a risk, spend big. What do you make of that argument?
Well, again, the outcome will tell us whether it was money well spent or not, because this deficit, for us, the confidence would have been a little bit better if we had shown a path to getting it down faster. It only comes down from, I think, about 78 billion, I'm rounding here, but 56 in 3 years. We had asked for at least half. Show us that we can bring it down. Now, we know the budget doesn't factor in the growth side of this thing, and so much is predicated on that. But, you know, as much as we talk about this budget and we're linking it to what problem are we solving, it's an investment crisis. But when we just came back, I was with the Prime Minister in Asia, and I'm sure he heard what I heard, which is, look, you know, we want to make sure you guys can actually create the conditions for investment. You're going to build things and everything. But let us tell you what really matters. What really matters is, are you going to be able to review and renew the USMCA? Because these two things are connected. FDI will not, foreign direct investment, will not come into Canada, or less of it will come into Canada if we can't provide them access to the G1 economy.
And you're telling me that you are hearing from businesses around the world that they're worried that free trade, the free trade agreement between Canada, U.S., and Mexico might just Trump might throw it out the window, basically.
With good reason, right? Because the reality is uncertainty has been the friend of America. They're attracting capital with the uncertainty. And so whether they exercise a 6-month clause, which I do not believe they will do, but they can certainly rag the puck on the annual review and just kind of stretch it out past 2026 as they're already signaling. So we've got to make sure that we preserve the beauty of the free trade agreement. Is it's a calling card around the world saying you're not just coming to Canada, you're also getting access to the United States and Mexico via the free trade agreement.
Now, Armine, the free trade agreement is not something that we can sort of nail down in the budget, obviously. The size of the deficit, though, is something the government has control over. What do you make of the number?
Oh, the number is I think we were warned that it could be as high as 100 billion, and we were warned that so they would have wiggle room to look better in case we headed to the polls again.
This is an exercise in expectation management.
I think so. And also the second part is something that Goldy is kind of alluding to, which is this is not a one and done budget. We're going to come back to the table and talk about what we need to do in the spring. We're going to talk about it again next year because CUSMA will not be renegotiated. It'll probably be a bilat if we have any kind of a deal, and that deal can be broken. And it's absolutely true that investment will be very hard to attract to Canada because we're a market of 41 million people, and that's just not big enough for most investors.
I'm going to jump in here, too, because I do think that word bilat, sometimes we lose people. I want to be crystal clear about what you're saying. You're saying the free trade agreement, it's just going to be between Canada and the U.S. Perhaps Mexico and the U.S. would have their own agreement.
Mr. Trump hates multilaterals. He likes to be the only person at the table across from the other table.
Yeah, so I have a different point of view on that, just for the record. He signed the trilateral agreement, and it's very likely that for the president, a trilateral and multilateral could be different things. What he really doesn't like is U.S. doing a deal with Europe, U.S. doing a deal with Asia. So we should not give up the battle to bring about the review and renewal of the USMCA.
Armine, I also do want to ask you about your thoughts around trimming the civil service. Some of the work is already underway when you look at the timeline that the government has put in this budget, but they expect to eliminate 40,000 positions, in part through attrition and buyouts. Do you have a sense of whether it is really possible to do this all with caps or job cuts in the civil service inevitable?
I don't, because we didn't see where the cuts are going to come from. We know in some departments there is a quite old workforce, so maybe that attrition will be easy to do. But then the question becomes, have you cut your full-time equivalents too far, too fast to deal with the things you have to get done, whether that's in taxes or immigration or just the things that have huge backlogs right now.
Yeah, and we just don't have the information to answer that question.
So can I just say that on that issue, what we've seen as a government since it's come in, it's actually built 3 independent agencies outside of government. Whether
like the Major Projects
Office, the Housing Office, the Defense Investment Agencies. The government has now put in its budget an opportunity for sort of executive interchange. It's right in the budget. So what they're saying is our bureaucracy is not working for us the way we need it to. And if we have to go around it, we will. But you can't do that. You can't go around 300,000 people. So it's more important. It's less about how much you cut. Can you make them efficient and productive for the longer haul? That's what matters.
I would like to actually just double down on this because Jennifer Robson has said very clearly, she's been part of program review over and over again. saying that the speed with which this program review was done, that the bureaucrats were asked to identify 7.5%, 10%, and 15% cuts, means that we are taking a chainsaw to things, not a scalpel. So inevitably there will be mistakes made.
Okay, I want to end. People may think budgets are dry. I want to end with a little economist humor here, friends. From the Prime Minister himself, this is a clip from Mark Carney at his press conference unveiling the budget. He was asked by the Wall Street Journal about running deficits and what economic theory he's following. He didn't seem to love the question. Let's listen.
Is there a philosophy behind this? Are you into modern monetary theory? Are you a Keynesian?
Come on, Greg, you know better than to
how
throw
can
these
Canadians
insults.
be presented with continuing budget?
I don't know if jokes about Keynesian economics kill at parties, but I do want to ask both of you, for the non-economist, less business-minded folks out there, a takeaway from this budget about what it tells us about what Mark Carney really thinks about the economy, how he views the world. What should Canadians know about that? What was the lesson here?
For me, there was no lesson. He's still a sphinx. I still don't know what drives the man. Just in terms of Keynesianism, we are in an economic war. We have introduced military Keynesianism, but we don't know who it benefits. Does it benefit Canadians? Does it benefit France or Sweden or the United States? We don't know if it's true Keynesianism or just protecting Canada's interests.
Goldy.
So I won't use the economic word because I think what Mark Carney is showing is what I've known him to be and what people who know him believe he is, and that is extremely pragmatic. He is the fact that his sort of climb back and climb down on climate policy to reflect the realities, which we just thought the last 10 years was over the top. The modulation that he's making on that, the belief that government has a role to play to enable investment in defense and infrastructure, the fact that you have to run a deficit, all of these things are a pragmatic streak, partly because I think he's thinking big. He's thinking long term and he's thinking big about Canada's place in the world. And there's a reorientation of government that's taking place, but we're doing it while flying in midair and we're trying to figure out how to review and renew the USMCA.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. I know we could talk about Keynesianism all day, but this is the end of it. Thank you both so much for this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
A pleasure.
Goldy Hyder and Armine Yalnizyan. Let's dive a little deeper into this week's federal budget. Who does it help? Who wins? Who loses? Here at the House, we figured, why don't we try keeping score? Yes, we have an actual giant scorecard here with us. 3 big columns. Thumbs up, thumbs down, and shrug. We've also got an expert here to help tally up these pros and cons and in-betweens. Sahir Khan is Executive Vice President at the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy and former Assistant Parliamentary Budget Officer. Sahir, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Let's get our Sharpies ready here, Sahir, and start with voters, the people who are really hoping to see something for themselves, to help them pay the bills in this federal budget. Lisa Muthra spoke to our colleagues on CBC News Network. She's a food bank user, voted for Mark Carney in the last election, and had this to say about the budget.
It doesn't target me whatsoever. It targets corporate sector. It hasn't dealt with Canadians and their issues with rent, food, grocery store prices. I have seen young couples, millennials, everybody at the food bank while I'm lining up with other people. It's not just marginalized and poor people. It's actually young millennials and families. And it's really heartbreaking. What's happened here with this budget is it doesn't include any of us.
Sahir, especially after hearing Lisa there, was there enough for people facing the cost of living crunch in this budget?
Well, this was not a chicken in every pot budget, but most of the measures that came under the Trudeau government continued, and then there was an increment added by the Carney government.
So you're talking about measures like childcare?
Dental, child benefit, childcare, pharmacare. All these were continued, none of them were cut.
So what I'm hearing from you is not a lot to necessarily put bounce in your step, but you're not getting a lot taken away either.
If you were looking for a lot more stuff, this wasn't the priority of the budget in that way.
Is that sort of meh? Is that a shrug? What are we going to call this?
So on affordability, I think it's a meh in that if you were looking for something new, there were some measures, but it wasn't the biggest line item in this budget.
Let's mark it down under the shrug column. There we go. Next, young people. The finance minister said in his budget speech, quote, "To the youth, this budget was made for you." Sahir, when you look at what surfaced for education, skills training, entry-level jobs, did young people win here, like the finance minister said?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some genuinely big-ticket items targeting young people. youth employment, helping youth find and keep jobs. These are things that are in the billions over the next few years. And so we didn't see a lot of these kind of signature measures in other areas. But if you're targeting youth and you're targeting employment, where I think a lot of anxiety lives, yeah, they definitely did that.
Sounds like you're saying that's a thumbs up.
I think so.
Here we go. How about public servants? Larry Rousseau, Executive Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress, had this to say about his take on the budget this week on Parliament Hill.
The budget really reads like austerity, and Canada's unions refuse to let workers pay the price. The government wants to cut tens of thousands of public service jobs. This will mean longer EI waits, slower passports, fewer safety inspections, food inspections. You do not modernize services by gutting them.
So if we look at a 5-year span starting in 2024, they want to reduce 40,000 positions. So some of this is through attrition, buyout packages. Some folks are going to lose their jobs. We don't really know what the breakdown is yet, but what would you say this budget meant for public servants?
Well, a little context. I think the growth of federal public service has far outstripped the growth in the population. And we had a big run-up kind of with the pandemic, and we really didn't see it kind of come back down particularly quickly. I think the budget has to have some element of shared pain. You know, you talked about the things that people didn't get, the chicken in every pot that sometimes people expect. Well, if you weren't going to get that, you certainly couldn't watch the federal government continue to grow. If the federal government didn't reallocate money from its own operations, it would have to borrow that. We would have had a larger deficit.
All of that said, if you're a civil servant, if you're a public servant, you're not going to give this a thumbs up. What if we put a tiny little check mark under thumbs down?
You're holding the pen, so I guess you get the last word.
Okay, here is one that was being watched pretty closely in the context of anticipated government cuts. I want to talk about how Indigenous leaders have responded to the budget. Grand Chief Kyra Wilson of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs released a statement earlier this week saying, "This budget contains good words and some important investments, and we acknowledge that. But Canada cannot call this a generational budget while reducing the very investments that ensure First Nation children have housing, clean water, and safety today." So on the one hand, there's money going into water systems, and Grand Chief Wilson did acknowledge that, but she also pointed to the concerns over the 2% cut to Indigenous Services Canada, Crown Indigenous Relations, and Northern Affairs. Her concern is that this is going to directly impact essential services and supports for First Nations. How do you look at this issue, Sahir?
Yeah, I think if we look at all the different portfolios that could have been impacted by this budget, I think Indigenous issues was probably the one that was spared. If you look at the relative cuts of Indigenous Services Canada and CERNAC versus other departments, they got off pretty light. And if we also consider a lot of this is in the operations of the department, not necessarily funding going to First Nations, then I think we have to have a little bit of realism in that context. I think that reconciliation is a work in progress. There is still ongoing litigation. We saw that the contingent liability that the government was carrying on its balance sheet, didn't go down. So we are expecting that the government's going to have to keep responding to discrimination and funding in First Nations, and that'll continue. But I think putting First Nations, Indigenous people generally at the table for a lot of this nation-building projects, that's really important. Support for them to be equal participants in that effort is really important. And some important gains on, child welfare, Jordan's Principle, other First Nations programs, we see that continuing and hope that, they treat reconciliation as a work in progress.
If there's a theme here, Sahir, it seems like could have been worse is a recurring answer for all of these. Should we put this one as a shrug too?
Sure.
Do you want to put this check mark on, Sahir?
Sure, let me do that.
Next, let's go to business and industry. A lot of opinions from the corporate world. Were there particular, corporate winners or losers in this?
Well, I think on the winning side, manufacturing, the big tax deduction really starts to level the playing field with the United States and the Trump administration's effort to kind of repatriate manufacturing. So really, for that and some of the innovation measures, the R&D tax credits are being simplified. I think driving growth with all these national projects, that was clearly the priority of this, to drive jobs and productivity in the Canadian economy. So that's probably got a big thumbs up.
Okay, so we're going to do another big check mark under thumbs up, although the size of the check mark might depend on your industry. How about cities? Let's listen to the mayor of Kitchener, Ontario, Barry Verbanovic. He shared his thoughts with CBC Radio's Morning Edition KW this week.
The budget certainly was an important step in the right direction in terms of seeing investments in housing, infrastructure, and communities. Probably the biggest piece for us was the Building Communities Strong Fund, which is $51 billion over 10 years. Overall, I think this is a budget that recognizes the important role that municipalities play in terms of the federal government's ambitions to set Canada on a new direction.
I mean, that sounds like a check mark to me. Sahir.
It definitely is. Basically, all of the Trudeau government infrastructure money continued and more was added to it.
Okay, big old check mark. Here's a big one, climate and the environment. Let's hear from someone who is watching this closely. Kathy Orlando is an environmentalist and founder of the Citizens Climate Lobby Canada. She's based in Sudbury, Ontario, and shared her reaction with our colleagues at CBC Radio's Morning North.
We're happy to see that the industrial carbon price and the methane regulations did not get axed. Other bright spots include the fact that the Youth Climate Corps got funding and there's clean electricity credits. But I'm sure you're waiting to hear the bad news, right? We're in a moment of electrifying our country, and there is no capital funding for the East-West electricity grid, although there are clean electricity tax credits. Also, they weakened the anti-greenwashing rules, and they're also winding down the tree planting program, despite the fact that we had massive wildfires these last couple of years.
Does that leave us with thumbs up, thumbs down, or sort of in the middle with the shrug?
I think if this was your highest priority for the budget, then probably a meh. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this budget really prioritized growth.
Okay, so another check mark under the meh, the shrug column. Foreign aid. We have seen countries like the US and the UK scaling back. In response to the reductions in this budget, Doctors Without Borders said they are deeply concerned by the Canadian government's plan to reduce funding for international assistance and global health programs, especially at a time when more people than ever need urgent medical and humanitarian support. What do we say?
Yeah, I think this happens whenever governments are retrenching. I think my expectation, though, is that we'll probably see more money flow to Canadian organizations delivering aid and less to the multilaterals, which I think is the signaling that's been made in the budget.
So is that a shrug?
I think most people would take this as a thumbs down.
Finally, defense. We knew the government was going to go big on defense and security in this budget. $81.8 billion over 5 years to rearm the Canadian military. Was defense the biggest thumbs up of this budget?
By far the biggest winner of this budget.
Okay. Let's take a look at our tally here. I'm going to say mixed bag. We've definitely got some thumbs up, quite a few shrugs, and a couple in the thumbs down column. What does this tell you, Sahir?
This is probably the takeaway of a lot of budgets. You have different groups happy, others sad, and a whole bunch of people in the middle. But I think this is what this government could do with the resources it had, and it's always a series of compromises, and they put a package together within those chalk lines.
Thank you very much for helping us make sense of this, Sahir.
Always a pleasure.
Sahir Khan of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy. Okay, that is it for us this week. Our crew on the house is Kristen Everson, Emma Godmere, Benjamin Lopez-Steven, and our senior producer is Jennifer Chevalier. Technical production by Miguel Plante. I'm Catherine Cullen. Thank you so much for listening.